Welcome to the AZ Political Podcast. I'm Jim Sharp, and our headlines this week. Earlier, Democrat Jonathan Nez announced his second campaign for Congress, hoping once again to represent Arizona's 2nd congressional district. By the way, Arizona CD2 is one of the largest congressional districts in the country. It covers more than half of Arizona's landmass, but contains only about 10% of its population. It's a highly rural district that covers Flagstaff, Prescott, the White Mountains, even a tiny bit of Pinal and Maricopa counties. But it also covers the area where Jonathan Nez previously governed as president of the Navajo Nation, America's largest native reservation and tribe. And by the way, if he is successful, he would be the first Native American to represent Arizona in Congress. And headline number 2, earlier this week, the deputy director of the Department of Homeland Security's counter-UAS program warned a Senate committee that drug cartels could soon deploy UAS, unmanned aircraft systems, commonly known as drones, as weapons at the border. But Mexico's president is pushing back on the idea. So Stephen Willoughby told the Senate Judiciary Committee that during the last 6 months of 2024, more than 27,000 drones were detected within 500 meters of the southern border, and said it's only a matter of time before Americans or law enforcement are targeted in the border region. But Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says there's no information there are new drones at the border right now. Okay, so we know the cartels have been using drones for all sorts of different reasons, and we know that drones are being used as weapons in the Ukrainian-Russian war and in other places. Just saying. Headline number 3, in the race to raise money to win the race to be Arizona's governor, we got a glimpse this week at candidates from both parties as they released their fundraising numbers. And Republican Karen Taylor Robeson is edging out fellow Republican Andy Biggs in campaign fundraising, but Democrat incumbent Katie Hobbs has more money in the bank than both of them combined. Robeson lists nearly $575,000 in individual donations, and she also loaned her campaign about $2.2 million. But after spending a lot of money on early ads, her cash on hand is about $876,000. Biggs had about $429,000 in donations, has about $437,000 in the bank. Hobbs raked in $1.3 million in the quarter. And even after spending $810,000 in the past quarter, still has more than $4.5 million cash on hand, and she doesn't have to worry about a primary opponent. So she can spend that all in the general election. My guest on the AZ Political Podcast is Maricopa County Sheriff Jerry Sheridan, who never had to worry about political campaigns until a few years ago. Welcome to the podcast, Sheriff.
Well, thank you, Jim.
Yeah, so let's start with that. The transition from being a law enforcement officer, which you've spent almost your entire career as, or am I wrong? Your entire career, right?
40 years, pretty much my entire adult life.
Yeah. And then suddenly you have to, in order to stay a top law enforcement officer, have to raise money and run a campaign. What's that like? Oh,
my gosh. The worst part of running a campaign is asking people for money, because don't forget, all my years as an adult, I was taught asking people for money is soliciting a bribe, right? So that goes against, everything.
So you don't ask for campaign contributions when you pull somebody over.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's against the law. You go to prison for that.
Yeah.
So asking people for money was absolutely the hardest thing. And, when you mentioned the fundraising with the other governor candidates, it's very difficult. And it was hard for me to make that transition. I had to have people help me sit down and teach me how to make those phone calls. I felt like I was chasing ambulances and things, asking people for money. But it's such a necessary part of the campaign, because those campaign signs you see on the street, the 4x4s, they're $50 a piece.
Yeah.
By the time you get the rebar and you need to get your name out there. And that's what it's all about, right? It's about name ID and getting out and talking to people. The getting out and talking to people part was not difficult. That was actually kind of fun. But the other part of being a candidate is the things that people say about you.
Right. I was going to ask you about that.
They don't know you. They don't like you because of whatever reason. And they say nasty things that are untrue. So I was originally told by one of the former board members, and He told me, he said, Jerry, he said, be ready. This is a blood sport. Politics is a blood sport.
Yeah.
And when you're in law enforcement, you don't have to deal with that kind of thing, because when you're dealing with fellow law enforcement officers, you can trust them. What they tell you, you could take that to the bank. And that was another realization, that politicians that you're dealing with now, many of them, wouldn't tell you the truth. And it's all about them. And as a law enforcement officer, it's all about everybody else and not yourself personally. So that was also a difficult transition.
I imagine, though, that over the last few years, there has been people speaking poorly about law enforcement, and law enforcement officers they don't know anything about, with this whole defund the police movement, and every cop's out there to drag you out of your car and pin you to the ground. And so maybe you got a little bit of experience with being besmirched in a political campaign by being besmirched just generally by being a law enforcement officer.
Right. And you add both those together, and it's not good.
Yeah. What I find very interesting is a lot of people don't realize the difference between the police and a sheriff's office. Sheriffs go way back into history. I think it's the 9th century in England. Mm-hmm. And police really didn't come into existence, at least in North America, until sometime in the 1800s. So there is a distinct difference, isn't there?
Oh, there's a huge difference. And the word sheriff comes from Shire Reeves from England, and that's where the word sheriff came from. Mm-hmm. The position of sheriff is established in the Arizona Constitution. The sheriff gets the authority from 11441. It's the duties and powers of the sheriff. And the sheriff gets his power from the people, because the sheriff reports only to the people. While I work closely with the Board of Supervisors, because I have to, because they give us the funding, mm-hmm. right, to do what we need to do. I don't report to them. I don't report to the mayor. I don't report to the governor. I don't even report to the President of the United States. I only report to the 4.6 million people here in Maricopa County. Mm. And that's a great thing as a law enforcement officer.
Which, by the way, you mentioned the population. Maricopa County is the 4th most populous county in the United States. I believe it's 4th also land-wise, and yet you are not a super big law enforcement agency when it comes to counting personnel. I think the Phoenix Police Department has, 3 times as many officers as you have? Maybe even more than that?
As sworn officers, right.
Yeah.
The sheriff's office total is 4,006 employees.
Okay.
And 75% of my staffing is assigned to the jail system. Mm. We run the 4th largest county jail system in the nation.
That's another difference between police and sheriff.
It's a big difference, because it's a whole different world of running a jail system, especially a big one. And then we also patrol the unincorporated areas in Maricopa County. And Maricopa County is 9,224 square miles.
Wow.
And we actually are the primary responders to about 500,000 people and in the unincorporated areas. And it's such a big county. It's 2.5 hours from one end of the county to the other.
It is a big place. I want to talk a little bit more about staffing and how that's going, because I know that was one of the things that you talked about in your campaign, as you wanted to up staffing, and now the Board of Supervisors has given you a bit more of an opportunity to do that too. But of course, topic number one always is, when talking with the sheriff of Maricopa County, no matter who that happens to be, and now we're on, is it the 4th? Are you the 4th or the 5th sheriff now since we've had this federal oversight case going on?
4th,
okay.
Right.
The last time that the attorney who's overseeing the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office in this case that accused the office of racial profiling apparently got a score of like 94% compliance. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And I think it was you actually even said, or maybe it was Supervisor Galvin said, that's an A grade, you know? So when does this end? So my question is, the judge in that case accused you of contempt back when you were chief deputy under the former Sheriff Arpaio. Do you feel like there'll ever be an end to this federal oversight case until you either are no longer sheriff or this judge is no longer a judge?
Well, I can tell you that and I say we collectively, the other sheriffs, and really it's the employees that work there, that work every day towards compliance. I mean, that is on everybody's mind, from a brand new employee, brand new deputy sheriff, to the sheriff. And we talk about it. We think about it every day. We work real hard to get in compliance. Now, there's about 360 paragraphs that we have to comply with, each one individually. And we have to maintain a grade of 93% in each one of those paragraphs for 3 years before they can go away. And this is where the rub is. Okay, we currently are in compliance with all but 7 paragraphs, and those 7 paragraphs are administrative. They're not the practical issues at hand: the racial bias, racial profiling.
So what administrative duties are you guys dropping the ball on, at least according to the federal overseers?
Okay. Well, a lot of it has to do with paperwork. And if a deputy sheriff forgets to check a box on a piece of paper, they're called in and they're, admonished about that. And so it's those minor issues of paperwork. And lawyers and courts thrive on documentation and paperwork. And so there is a problem with that, because people make mistakes. You're in a hurry, you miss a check box, or you check the wrong box, for example, and the monitors are very keen on those kinds of issues. So when I talk about the practical application, okay, the reason Melendrez case was started, it was about stopping Hispanic drivers, right? The judge basically found that the sheriff's office was targeting Hispanic neighborhoods for traffic stops, okay? I would agree with that. We shouldn't have been doing that. And so it got down to how long does it take for you to stop a Hispanic driver as opposed to a white driver, okay? So now we are down to a 4-second discrepancy between a deputy sheriff stopping a white driver and how long it takes, as opposed to stopping Hispanic drivers. 4 seconds.
Wow.
I think that's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And so now they've moved the issue.
This is on average, by the way, because there are some Hispanic drivers, obviously. The number of people that are pulled over by the sheriff's office every year in Maricopa County, I'm sure there are Hispanic drivers who are let go faster than some white drivers too, right?
Correct. It depends on the paperwork they have with them. Do they have their driver's license? Can they speak English? All those kinds of issues. And every traffic stop is recorded on body cameras, okay? And also the documentation the deputy fills out after the traffic stop. So we know that there is no racial bias or profiling in traffic stops. Some people, like the ACLU and the DOJ, have now turned from stopping Hispanic drivers to why does it take longer for a Hispanic driver. But every traffic stop is documented and reviewed by a supervisor. And if there is every traffic stop, and we make...
So it's not just the questionable ones, like where somebody complains, it's...
No, every traffic stop is reviewed by a sergeant.
Wow.
And we stop over 20,000 people a year.
Wow. Yeah, so I guess, the way the way out of that is to just not pull over people who might be breaking the law or speeding, making neighborhoods unsafe, hauling a load that's not properly secured, which endangering other drivers. I mean,
Well, that's very intuitive of you to think that, because that's exactly what happens.
Wow.
And when you come under either a consent decree, which this isn't, this is a court order,
right.
It basically puts a wet blanket over the deputy's desire to want to go out and do their job, because now they're going to be scrutinized on everything that they do.
So this $300 million plus, and I'm not sure how close it is to 350 million or if it's closer to 300 million, that this has cost Maricopa County taxpayers over the 10 years that this case has been in place. Is part of that cost like sergeants taking, for lack of a better term, company time reviewing every traffic stop, or is that really what's been paid to that not the court, but that lawyer who's running the Federal Oversight Office?
Okay, yeah, no, the big expense in any operation is personnel, right? Mm-hmm. So the judge ordered us early on to, I think it was in 2013, to promote about 20 plus sergeants. And that's a recurring cost every year, and that's not cheap. Mm-hmm. We also had to establish 2 new divisions. Divisions are run by captains, lieutenants, the sergeants as deputies, civilian employees, 2 different divisions. So it's really a personnel cost is the big factor. Plus internal affairs, before the court order, we had about 15 people in internal affairs. Now we have over 50. So
Wow.
you can see where those costs build up very quickly.
And I'm sure an argument could be made that maybe internal affairs wasn't big enough under Sheriff Arpaio and during those years when maybe things weren't done the right way, but to increase it by 4 times?
Well, my opinion is I disagree with how we handle or how we are ordered by the court to handle internal investigations. Good example is vast majority of those complaints are the deputy rolled his eyes at me, or the deputy was rude, those kinds of things. And historically, and probably in every other law enforcement agency in this country, those complaints go to the sergeant. The sergeant talks to the deputy, see what happens. And now we have body cameras. Well, of course, you can't see somebody roll his eyes. But,
right.
But you can see how they've treated the individual. And they would normally go away. But because of the court order, we have to investigate every one of those cases, including complaints from one employee to another. Okay, so if you have 2 people don't like each other, I'll just make a complaint against this guy.
Right.
And now it has to go to an investigation. But the reality of the situation is, overall, for the last 10 years or 11 years, remember, 20,000 traffic stops a year, we have had 40 complaints that go to the core issue of this order, and that is racial bias and profiling.
Okay, wait a second. Can we do the math real quick? So approximately 200,000 traffic stops, and there's been 40 complaints that go to what the court is upset about.
Correct. And out of that, there have been 6 complaints sustained.
Wow.
One employee, one deputy sheriff, was responsible for 3 of those. He was terminated. Another deputy was responsible for another one. He was terminated. And every one of those complaints, some people might say and criticize, well, the sheriff's is only 40 complaints and only a handful have been sustained. Well, you have to realize that the court-ordered monitor, reviews every one of those complaints. Mm-hmm. So it's not like the sheriff was whitewashing anything. It is the fact of the case. A lot of people complain, racial issues when you stop them and they're angry, whatever. But when it comes down to what really happened, only 6 were sustained.
Wow. I'm absolutely floored. I mean, I knew it wasn't, up here, but I had no idea it was way down here.
So you have to give credit to the deputy sheriffs out there doing an outstanding job. And one of the biggest issues that I had coming in as the sheriff when I took office in January was, how do I change the perception of the public that MCSO is not a racist organization? And so I hired somebody who was a community relations officer with the city of Phoenix for 23 years. He then retired and went to work for ICE for 23 years in the same position, dealing with the people that were activists against what ICE was doing and all that for 23 years. And Rudy knows everybody in the Hispanic community. And so I hired him as a chief over our community relations bureau, because he has given me the ability to get out there and talk to many people in the Hispanic community. He helped me bring on 2 new Citizens Advisory Board members. Felix Garcia is a very well-known Hispanic here in Maricopa County. And Mike Nowakowski. And you probably know Mike's name. He was on the city council.
Yep.
He's been an activist most of his life. And they both work for the Citizen Advisory Board, which the court ordered us to have a board. So there's 3 members appointed by the plaintiffs' attorneys, the ACLU, the DOJ, and we had 2 positions, and they went unfilled for a long time. So I filled them with Felix and Mike. And they have a pretty good idea of what MCSO is all about, and they're out there helping us change the perceptions of the community.
So obviously the perception of the court via the federal monitor has not fully changed, that perception of MCSO. But do you feel like things are a lot better as far as how the community views, especially the Latino and Hispanic community views MCSO?
Well, I don't know if it's a lot better. It's getting better. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
And we're making an effort every day. I had a dinner at a very prominent Hispanic person's home in North Scottsdale over the weekend that a lot of people from the Hispanic community were there, very influential people. You know, there's always going to be a certain segment of the Hispanic community that is never going to accept the sheriff's office, and they don't care what we do. They refuse to look at the facts, kind of like what I told you about the discrepancy in the traffic stops. And they say that we're not in compliance with that part of the court order.
There's going to be people of all races who are just never completely happy with law enforcement in general. Am I wrong?
No, you're correct.
Yeah. So I know this is something you talk a lot about, so I'm going to give you a break. We can stop talking about that now if you want, unless you've got more to add.
No, I think I pretty much said it. You know, 4 seconds discrepancy, I think is pretty darn good. And when you think about it, I'm not aware of any law enforcement agency in this country that is as scrutinized as the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. And there really is no basis to compare whether we're doing a good job or not, because nobody else is collecting the data we are.
Wow.
And so that's always a burr under my saddle, because we feel we're doing an excellent job. And that's really what the core of this court order is all about. The judge did not want biased policing. Neither do I, and neither do my deputies.
Yeah, yeah. And there's no grade to curve, no curve to grade on.
Correct.
Because you've got no other agencies. So let's talk about staffing. That was something that you talked about in your campaign. The Board of Supervisors has now provided you with some extra money to do that. How's that going? And is there an aversion for those who are already working in law enforcement to transfer over to the sheriff's office because of all the problems we just talked about?
Well, that is an issue. However, the largest vacancy factor I have is in the jail system.
Oh, so
it's
you're
always
detention
difficult to
officer, yeah.
hire people that work in the jail. Okay, so I have about 1,000 vacancies.
Wow.
When I came in, we had about 1,300 vacancies in the jail system. So now we have put a very active recruitment effort forward, and let's face it, our best recruiters are the employees. Okay, so I know that what we're doing, what the board did with the pay raises and bonuses, and the effort that I give, and I go out and I visit the jails, I visit the deputies, on the weekends and all that. They know they have a new sheriff in town, and so our recruitment and retention is much better than it was when I took office. And our problem now is, you ready for this? We don't have enough classroom space to train all the new hires.
Oh, wow.
So we're scrambling to find some additional classroom space.
So that's bad/good news.
That's great news.
Yeah. Amazing. And there's a big difference between, they're both law enforcement officers, right? But there's a big difference between being a deputy patrol sheriff and a detention officer, right?
Correct.
And I think maybe the one who carries a gun, because, detention officers can't really carry a gun, because you don't want to have a gun available to inmates, right? That job is a little more glamorized. Is that part of the problem maybe with recruitment for detention officers?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
When we grow up, I always wanted to be a cop like my dad. My dad was a lieutenant NYPD. I grew up around that. My uncles were New York City cops, and I always wanted to be a New York City cop when I grew up. Mounted cop, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And so as kids grow up, they want to be police officers or firemen. Nobody ever thinks about, I'm going to grow up and work in the jail system. But I can tell you, the jail system and the prison system is the most important part of the criminal justice system itself, because they cannot fail at their job. They're housing the bad guys to keep them off the street, and they play a key role in keeping our community safe. And a lot of people don't realize that. It's a very rewarding job. It's a very difficult job, but we're trying to get the pay up for the officers so they come here, and we are hiring a lot of lateral people from the state prison system.
Okay.
Because we pay better, and our working conditions are much better in the county jail system than in the prison system. And
it takes a special person to be a detention officer, in the same way that it takes a special person to be a parole or a probation officer, because you have to get along with the people that you are, monitoring.
Right.
And, because that's for the safety of you and your fellow officers, but also you don't want to churn people out of, in this case, the jail system, who are worse people than when they came in.
Right. I was a detention officer in the beginning of my career at the sheriff's office.
Okay.
So I worked in the jail, and the vast majority of people that are in custody, they're easy to work with. Now, there's a certain percentage, maybe 5%, that are dangerous individuals, and they're in the county jail system, they're locked down.
Yeah.
So, in the prison system, this is the difference between the two. In the prison system, they have so many of those people that they're walking around, and it's much more difficult to be a corrections officer. But the other thing, too, is 80% of the people that we have in custody in our jail have not been convicted of a crime.
Right. So
they're
innocent
waiting
till proven
trial.
guilty. Yeah.
So they have certain constitutional rights that we have to meet that they don't have to in the prison system. So they get a lot better treatment and care in the county jail system.
And just for my own edification, because I'm always, anytime I see this in print or I hear it in in a news story. I'm like, you guys don't know what's going on. If you're convicted of a crime and your sentence is a year or less, you serve jail time. If it's a year or more, you go to prison, right? There's a difference.
Not anymore.
Oh, really?
No,
okay.
they changed that. So you could be convicted of a felony and sentenced to prison for 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It used to be that way, Jim.
Okay.
But they changed the law probably 12, 13 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, but there is a difference between jail and prison for sure.
Oh,
right?
there absolutely is.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned this already, that you grew up wanting to be a New York City police officer, and you grew up in Queens, New York. I think a lot of people would say that's not where I'd imagine an Arizona sheriff to come from. But you did mention that you wanted to be a mounted police officer.
Yes.
So was it your love of horses that brought you west?
Well, let me tell you something. My dad came home. I was a senior in high school. I'd had my classes already. I was going to go to St. John's University and get my degree and then go and join NYPD, right, and try and become a mounted officer. But when I was a little kid, I was probably 7 years old. I was in the car with my dad. He had a police radio in his car, and we were in Manhattan at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and there was a call that came out of 2 officers that were shot at a bank robbery. And I was looking out the window. My dad says, "Get your head down. We're going to go." My dad was always the cop on duty every second.
On duty when he wasn't on duty.
Always.
Yeah.
And because we were only like 2 blocks away, and I was looking out the window, and I saw 2 mounted cops at a full gallop down the sidewalk in Manhattan, and bodies going all over the place. And I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And that was the moment I realized that's what I wanted to do. And so when Dad came to my little brother and I, and he said, "We're moving to Arizona," I was thinking, where is Arizona, you know? And this was in 1976, and that's when we moved here. My dad always wanted to go out west and live the life of a cowboy, and he always wanted horses too. And we didn't have horses until I met my wife, because she was born and raised here, born and raised with horses. So she brought horses into our lives, and I've had horses for 37 years now. So I feel it's okay for me to wear this cowboy hat.
I'm not going to tell the sheriff he can't wear a cowboy hat.
Well,
anyway.
you know, and so when you have horses, it's a complete change in your lifestyle.
Yeah.
So
there's a reason they're used in therapy, and there's a reason that little girls love horses. They're just these gentle giants, and I know my kids can't get enough of them anytime they've had an opportunity to ride.
Well, you talked earlier about raising money and what a stress that was for me. So you know what I would do? I would go down and sit next to the horses and make those phone calls.
There you go.
Because that was my happy place.
That's amazing. That's really funny. And the other thing I wanted to talk to you about personally is you're not just an avid photographer. You're an award-winning photographer. What awards have you won?
I've won some national recognition, and I've won some local juried art shows. And I have
landscapes, portraits.
Landscapes mostly. I shoot with a large format camera, an 8x10. And if people don't know what that is, that's the old kind of camera where you put the dark cloth over your head.
Wow.
Right? And it's, the film is 8 inches by 10 inches.
They took pictures of Abraham Lincoln.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love landscapes. I love to go and find ancient Indian ruins, Native American ruins. Southern Utah is one of my favorite places to shoot. Of course, Arizona is absolutely beautiful. Some of my personal favorite images are of San Xavier del Bac with the monsoon clouds and all that. And that's kind of what I do.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, and you mentioned where I grew up, it's, northern Arizona, far northern Arizona, just south of Utah.
Yeah.
All in that area. First Kayenta on the Navajo Nation, and then Page, which is, of course, has both have unbelievable red sandstone, which you don't get in the black and white format so much.
Yeah.
But right, it's
well, you
almost can't take a bad picture.
The Slot Canyon's up there by Page. I drug my 8x10 camera. It's 60 pounds worth of equipment, by the way.
Gosh.
And
with the sticks and everything.
Up,
too, right?
Yep, up and down, the Slot Canyons. And the guides, the Native American guides, thought I was crazy.
Well, you might have been.
Yeah, well, probably. But that's what I do. That's what I love to do. And it's such a different way to see the world, and photography has taught me to see the beauty in everything and the way the light falls on things, and it's very therapeutic for me. That's why I really kind of started the whole thing, is to get in the dark room with that nice amber light. It's cool in there, put some music on and make some images.
That's awesome. That's cool. Well, I really appreciate your taking time with me to join me on the AZ Political Podcast, and especially after the first place I met the sheriff was speaking at a fundraiser for a place called the Recovery Cafe, and I stood up in front of this crowd, and the sheriff was in the crowd, and I admitted I'm not only an alcoholic, I'm also a drug addict, but I've been in recovery for almost 1.5 decades now, and looked at the sheriff and said, by the way, I'm not suggesting that you not arrest anybody for DUIs or not hold anybody who's dealing drugs and hold them, to the letter of the law. But I do appreciate your, being aware that people are out there trying to get better, and supporting that. I appreciate that.
And we do a lot of programs in the jail system to help people through that.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's good. And keep that up, please. And if I could be any help in that area, let me know. All right. Once again, Sheriff Jerry Sheridan of Maricopa County, pleasure. Thanks for being with us here today.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay. I'm Jim Sharp. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks for watching the AZ Political Podcast with Jim Sharp. Click the box to watch more from KTAR News and tap the button in the middle to subscribe.